Go ahead and want to introduce. All right, you're going to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you and welcome everyone. I encourage you to shout out if you have questions or comments during the time together here. So we'll cover a few things, and I'll start telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Linda Ferber, and
Linda,
yes.
do you want to spotlight yourself?
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, so let me just get that. All right, how's that?
No, you still aren't spotlighted.
Okay. Larry, I made you a co-host. Can I ask
Okay.
you to
go
do
ahead.
that?
Keep talking.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll start over here. My name is Linda Ferber and I live in Minnesota. I've been turning since about 2000. So that may sound like a lot of time, but a lot of that time life got in the way. So there was, big gaps where turning just wasn't an emphasis. So it's always been really a passion and something I enjoyed immensely. Along that journey, I had ups and downs, and I had a really steep learning curve. I didn't have a lot of basics in wood, or obviously no expense or experience on the lathe. So I took every class and every demo my chapter offered, and when someone would come to demonstrate and I take a hands-on, they'd say, oh, look, this is the perfect opportunity to learn, and it was. But they would offer to resharpen my tools, give a different view of how I should do things. And so I would get home and my tools wouldn't work, and I just got more and more frustrated. So I decided that I need to take control of my own learning and do a project over and over and over again, because I had heard many people say that is the best way to learn. So how I approached that was take a year and work on one type of item rather. So I had a year of platters and various other things, boxes. And what I found is by that concentration and repeating the project over and over, I did start to, for myself, make sense of what I was hearing from all the demonstrators. And then from that foundation, I was able to expand and incorporate more techniques. So, example, in the year of the platters, I did improve immensely, in my opinion. There were subtle changes and huge dramatic leaps. So I had an interest in embellishment and carving. So I approached that in a similar way. I started with jewelry and making little discs, and my thought there was I could do some embellishments and not have an hour or two or invested in the time in making a platter or a bowl with a rim. So I could make a disc in a short amount of time, embellish and carve, and throw it away if it wasn't successful. So with that I soon discovered the discs weren't quite large enough, so moved on to mushrooms. And how I approached this was similar in I selected 3 burrs that I thought would give me a variety of textures and patterns, and set about discovering what they could do and how to approach it. And I wanted just to explain, a pattern is a visual element that repeats, such as a plaids or stripes, whereas texture is something that can be felt. So with the mushrooms, I wanted both patterns and textures. And the burrs I selected were saber-tooth and fairly aggressive in creating those patterns and textures. So a lot of the results in the mushrooms, these patterns and textures were to show up the results with painting. So I thought I'd start by showing you a few finished pieces. And that way you could see what the end results. And when I'm talking about the dry brush painting, for example, and finishing all parts of the work, you would have some examples. So these are a few mushrooms. The textures and patterns are really highlighted with the spaces between the marks, and the dry brush technique is very, very conducive for showing that work. Also, I make the mushrooms in boxes, and I'm showing you this and as well is because it is very important to think about all the sides, all the areas of the mushroom. Don't just stop at the edge. A mushroom has some areas that might be cracked or flawed or bites taken out of it. So to think about that where you're doing your work. In this process of creating pieces, I do have a real definite pattern to what I do, and I make a lot of drawings. I make sample boards. I make sample boards that look like finished pieces, or sample boards that are just textures in themselves. So this is one sample board, and I did this on a platter that had a few flaws, and the bark caused some holes and it started to warp. So I turned it into a sample board. I took that a little bit further and did another sample board. But I found my process does start with a sketchbook. I make sketches of what I want it to look like. I make sketches for give me idea of dimensions and what the concept will be at the end. So you can see these are very, they're just rough sketches, but I do find it is very helpful for me for planning out which direction I want to do and planning for what type of wood and what size. It helps me also with proportions. If it doesn't look good on a piece of paper, it's easy to take an eraser, change the size, change the dimensions, and you can do that while you're watching TV or doing other things, waiting for dinner to cook. So I have prepared a little video here that shows some of the equipment, and I did that so it would be easier to see up close with the camera some of the equipment. So I'm going to start that. Let me know if you're hearing the sound okay.
No sound.
Okay. Okay, let me try that one more time. So the sound didn't come through. Let me try that one more time here for you. Just a second while I start that video again.
Showing today
Okay.
a few
Sound
of
okay?
the supplies, equipment that I use in carving and wood burning. First off, the personal protection equipment is extremely important. I have a fume extractor. I bought that online from Amazon. It does help considerably to remove the fumes from the work area. And mask is very important as well. I'm using currently the RZ mask, which has replaceable carbon filters. For turning and carving, I use a power cap. The PK Safety Power Cap is lightweight, provides fresh air, and impact resistant shield, good for both turning and carving. For general shop, dust collection, air filtration, and fan, it is important to keep your lungs safe. I use an overhead air filtration system, a dust collection, and also the Powermatic PM 1250 for general dust extraction. In the carving, I'm using a micro carver, and there's a few bits I want to show you close-up pictures. In the micro carvers, there's several units that you can purchase. The most basic and most common is this blue unit. It can be purchased online. There are a couple different saws that I like. The one on the left is a Cudsaw rotor saw. It comes in fine, medium, and coarse. Also, to do the same task, there is the saber tooth rotor saw. also available fine, medium, and coarse. The burrs that I like to use are ball nose. These are good for removing material quickly. The advantage is that the curve on the top also has cutting units that just give you a lot of flexibility when you're hogging out wood. Also available fine, medium, and coarse. This has the same ball nose shape, but it's technically a stump cutter. I like this one for that same reasons that I prefer the ball nose. In burrs still, I like the ball cutters. They come in a lot of different sizes, and the ones I do like are diamond. The diamond comes in US, Swiss, and German. Also, I have a set of the cup burrs. Those are very flexible, give you a lot of variety in your patterns. In carving, in wood burning, there's still sanding. Using the micro carver for sanding, there's a few mechanical devices that will make the job a little bit easier. The 3M radial Bristol discs. There's a flip-off sanding disc. Both of these materials come in different courses, and you can go through the grits just like any other sanding. Also very handy for the carving is this fuzzy wheels. It does just like the name implies, removes some of the fuzzies. Also, there is a mandrel that I use for adhering with double-faced tape, different grits of sandpaper. Wood burning. The unit that I have is the RZ razor tip wood burner. There's two pen types that I'd like to talk about. One is the skew tip, very similar shape as the wood turning skew, and a ball tip, very similar shapes and sizes to the carving ball tip. Sharpening is also a skill and something that needs to be done with the wood burning.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we need to get back to speaker view here. Everything okay, and you're back with me?
Okay.
So, all right, thank you. I like to show that video because it shows the burrs very closely, and sometimes during the demo, especially if I'm moving and carving, you don't get quite the same opportunity to look at it. I wanted to talk about the turning of the mushrooms a little bit before we get started. With the carving on the mushroom, every single bit of that mushroom will be covered in carving and the texture will be altered. However, that doesn't mean that you can cover up a bad shape or a bad curve or any of those things with the turning. So I have some of the items here that are waiting for carving that will give you an example. So on this box, you can see, just like a bowl, that it is important, the curve on the top, the item is small. People can take their fingers and feel the thickness. So a lot of attention is necessary for the turning portion of the work. So a little bit of things can be covered up, but not everything. I'm going to switch the camera one more time here to the overhead. And I wanted to talk a little bit about getting started. There is a Dremel that comes in a lot of different sizes, a lot of different price ranges, but you can buy a Dremel usually between around $60 to $75. And a Dremel is a very good way to start, in particular if you're not 100% sure this is what you want to pursue. The Dremel has some disadvantages over a microcarver. The Dremel is larger, it's noisier, it's heavier, vibrates a little bit more, but if you're gonna just carve for a half hour to an hour, you surely can get by, and this is a very efficient use. The first burrs I'd like to talk about today are the cut saw or rotor cutters. And here are 4 examples. And I'm going to put the first one in the Dremel to get started. And I'm selected this little mushroom shape that is going to be a morel. And I have selected the cut saw because it removes wood quickly, and you can make a lot of different interesting shapes. I'm going to select this one. One of the things about having arthritic hands that it is often necessary for me to have a pliers on hand to help sharpen something. So I always make sure with the Dremel that I do use the pliers and make sure it is sharpened. Right now, I do have my Powermatic dust extraction working. It is fairly quiet, but that noise is running in the background. I'm going to turn on the Dremel, but before I do, just because of the noise, I'm going to go through some of the steps with the machine off. Typically, I want to secure the work very firmly in my hand and have it stabilized by resting on a table or workbench or something. With my right hand, I hold the Dremel machine, and with my fingers make a connection between my 2 hands. With the Dremel, I draw the, put the machine to the wood and push down with a little bit and then draw forward. So I'm going to turn on the machine and still go through those procedures, but I wanted to make sure you can hear me. I've got my curling between my 2 fingers. I'm changing their angle a little bit. And you can see dust does produce a lot of dust. I always recommend wearing a a dust shield, face mask, or respirator when you're carving. So you can see the texture inside of those cuts. That is what I'm after. And with this cut saw, it does remove the wood very easily and fast. So that is one application for this burr. Also, I use it on the stem or base of the mushrooms to create texture. I'm going to turn the machine back on. Got it firmly between my hands and holding it towards me, making those cuts. So you can see here how noisy and how easy that Dremel works. I'm going to switch to the micro carver, but I wanted to let you know it is an option for getting started. And the carving unit that I have is from MDI Wood Carvers. They have a lot of different units. And the blue unit I showed in the intro video is a good introduction machine. And it currently is about $200. There are upgrades. This one was about $300. The micro carvers and the Dremels both use burrs that have a 1/8 or 3/32 shank. The handpiece does have a collet that lets you switch between the two different sizes. This handpiece is very easy to use to open and close. You just click the top part, insert the burr, and click it to close. So it is very easy to insert the burrs, very easy to change. So I'm going to turn this machine on, and you'll notice the difference in sound, and you'll notice how easily I can hold this. I hold it more like a pencil. I hold the work the same way with forming a triangle with my hands and firmly supported on the workbench. So same, I'm going to turn up the speed just a little bit. Taking the piece, making contact with the wood and dragging it towards me. You don't necessarily need to make the finished cut all in one. You can go through 2-3 times and make the cut deeper and wider. So it's just like turning. You don't necessarily need to hog everything out in the first pass. You can make several cuts and achieve that same, achieve the texture that you're looking for. And as I'm doing this, I'm making sure I go down to the edges and break the surface of the edge. When I have these burrs out, you can see there's different sizes, different dimensions. So this one is a fairly wide diameter, and I do really like and enjoy using this smaller diameter. One of the reasons in particular with the mushrooms, I can get closer to the top and get underneath smaller areas. So it does leave a little bit different texture, but that doesn't necessarily worry me. So I can go through, clean up, and get closer underneath the cap. You can see I'm not getting 100% to the area, but I have different burrs that I use to do that. Any questions about the cud saw that we've shown so far?
Just a minute.
Ask her if she has ever tried this flex shaft with the Dremel.
The question
The
is,
question, yeah, the question is, have you ever used the flex shaft with the cutting tools? On the
I
Dremel?
have, yes, I thank you for that. That's a very good question. I have seen them, and I've talked to a friend that has one, and just a second, I'm change my camera here. The question is that if I've ever used the flex shaft on the Dremel, and I have not. I have not purchased it. I've used it at a friend's house, and I did find that the handpiece was very nice and easy to use. The noise was still there, but I could position it a little bit further away. I did find a little bit of loss of power in the distance on that shaft. So it would be a good option. And I understand they do run about $30, $35. Was that helpful? Okay, thank you. I'll switch camera back. The cud saw also works as totally removing wood. So I'll go back to morel mushroom, and I'm just saying this area, I wanted to reduce it. So change the shape on my morel. This is a solid piece of wood. I don't have to worry about going through a thin cap of a mushroom. So I'm holding it on the edge and just dragging it back and forth. Then I'll go back on that reduced area and make the marks. So there is usually more than one way that you can use a burr or hold it. So that was one of the burrs that I started with. And this one was selected for those features that it could remove wood easily, fast, and leave tons of texture. I'm gonna switch to the ball nose burrs. And I left this one in the mix so you would get an idea what a used burr starts to look like. It just get a little discolored. Sometimes the teeth may bend or get worn down, but I still do find some uses for this. This is a more aggressive ball nose burr, and I like this one also for using to create the stems and gills on a mushroom. So I'm going to put this in, same procedure, click open, click shut, and I always tug, make sure it's secure in the handpiece. I'm going to move on to the gills of the mushroom. And on this mushroom, I have it secure in my hand. I'll tilt it up so you can see a little better. I make contact with the burr and drag it towards me. It makes a cut very similar to the rotor saw, but the edges, because it's wider, are a little, the cuts are a little wider. And I'll go right to the edge and I'll put the burr down on its side to give you an idea of how you can break the edge on the burr. Was there a question?
Yeah. What kind of wood is that?
Okay, this one, I do like to use Minnesota woods. This is, and I get a lot of my wood free from the guys in the chapter. I think this one is, they are both, oh brother, free wood for sure. And I agree, but I do like to use birch. Birch is one of the favorite, and also box elder. I don't think these are box elder. They don't look quite like birch either. So this one I think is butternut. And this might be a soft maple, a silver maple. I do like all of the softwoods for carving the mushrooms. I do really enjoy getting the free wood scraps from the guys in the chapter. So a lot of times I can't be too picky, but cherry is another favorite that's a little harder to find in scraps. There's a guy in my chapter that turns handles for a tool manufacturer, and all those handles are river birch. And so he saves a lot of those scraps for me. So I'll get 3 and 4 inch lengths scraps of river birch. And if you haven't tried river birch, it's really, really enjoyable to carve and to turn. So this burr I use for making the gills as well as on the stems. So I'm going to go and back to this piece. You can see on here as I'm cutting with this, I'm getting some shavings. This one is cutting very nicely today. I can go over areas that I did earlier with the cut saw, get a little closer to the top. And this has different applications. You can cut with the sides and the top. And like I showed earlier, you can break the rim using the side of the burr. Just like turning, there's different sounds the machine makes as you're carving and cutting. But one of the favorite applications for this is the top of the mushroom. And in the finished pieces, you could see the patterns and the textures that I was getting. So I'm firmly holding the mushroom in my left hand, making contact with my hand to the piece of work and holding the handpiece firmly. This, I do the similar, make contact the wood push down and drag it towards me. With this top of the mushroom, I'm making deeper and more circular, angular motions in the gills and the stem, long sweeping, but here it's a little different. So making contact, holding it down, going through 2-3 times to deepen it. And what I'm doing is paying attention between each one of these to the areas raised. And you'll notice as I'm cutting in, after I finish one, I go back. Yes?
Could you just move your hands up in the center a little bit better?
How's this?
That's better.
Okay. Each time I make a cut, I rotate the mushroom so that I'm getting the marks in a different direction. That rotation helps me in getting a variety and more of a random look. So this, I would go around and take my time, get the all the little areas. I would go back. For example, in inspection, I saw the ridge between those two was a little bigger than I like. So I went back, modified it, and made it more uniform, not uniform, but a more pleasing diameter. Too big of a shape, and the paint just, it's not as dynamic or as pleasing if the area has too many flats or areas that are not uniform. It doesn't mean that they're all the same, just uniform in a certain narrow band of width. So this burr is a saber tooth and it's fairly aggressive. I have ball nose cutters that are all steel, and I'll put one of those in the handpiece and talk about it next. Can you see right in this area, I have some fuzzies and some burrs sticking out in the wood, and just like turning, you do need to address that. Any torn grain that is caused by the carving should be taken care of. So this is one of the burrs, because it is steel, it is used for cleanup. So I can just gently drag it over those areas and soften the edges and clean up some of those little stragglers, the fuzzies areas. I do make several passes in cleaning it up, inspecting the work, making sure every area is touched. One of the things that I have discovered in making a lot of mushrooms, that using the cud saw or the burr nose, it creates a very, the part that is this original surface, the edge of that in your cut is very square. And that just happens because of the burrs and the cutting. So I'll go back with this and just soften those edges. And for me, that makes it look more organic. Another thing I do, if there is a ridge that looks like it is too weak or will be too thin and won't stand up to being touched or accidentally dropped, I will carve it down a little bit just to make it more stable and more secure. So I'll go through the whole area, softening the edges and going through defuzzing, deburring. So I would look at the top of the mushroom cap, and right now I don't see any areas that have any burrs or anything that needs cleanup right at the moment with this. This is also a ball nose shaped cutter. It is a stump cutter, and I use that in smaller areas. So even though these are all this similar shape burr, each one has a little bit, it is enabling me to get a variety, adding a lot of texture with the aggressive, adding some finesse in smoothing with the others. Any questions on this ball nose cutter?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you. So the next section is, these are round burrs, and this is called ball cutters. So I see our time here is about 10 o'clock, and you have a break at 10:30. So I'm gonna do this cutter and one more, and then after the break, we'll do painting, if that sounds good for you guys.
That'll be great.
Okay, so with these, I'm gonna put in the collet to reduce the size and put in one of these saber tooth ball cutters. They are just as aggressive as the ball nose and others. And this, I do on occasion use this on the cap of the mushroom. It does give me a more round type cut, even though I'm going through it several times. And that is a personal preference. I try to mix it up a little bit so that it's not all completely the same, you know, on each and every one of the little divots. But this burr is very nice because it's the saber tooth and the big aggressive burr tips. It is a favorite. It does come in green, yellow, and white, and those are more aggressive and less aggressive. So the saber tooth does make the burrs in a lot of these same shapes that I like. These are the, can you see those okay? These are the diamond burrs. I'm gonna back up just a second. The saber tooth burrs will last a long time. with constant use, they may last for a year. And one of the things that I do is put the burr into the machine, turn the machine on, and take a wire brush and just remove any of those wood chips that are left between the teeth. That will clean up the surface. It doesn't stop the discoloration, but it keeps the burrs clean, and it doesn't sharpen them by any means, but just keeps them nice and clean. And that will work with all of those saber-tooth burrs, a gentle cleaning. With the diamond, there is a little, they don't last quite as long. And these are ball shapes still, which gives you a lot of flexibility in the surface because you have a lot of area that will be touching the wood. But they are not as an aggressive a cutter, and they are more for finesse and cleanup. So after I have inspected my whole mushroom cap for all of the areas to be complete and touched by the burrs, I do go and just gently go through one time the entire surface and try to clean up. See, there was some dust in there. In particular, before you do any painting, taking a wire brush and cleaning them is very, very helpful. So on the edges, I just go through, make sure that all the areas, even though it is the original surface, I want to make sure that every area has been touched, because the dry brush painting does, pick up the paint, and using a variety of colors, the more facets in the finish, the more your colors are going to show. In the gills, I do the same thing. If I hadn't gone through previous and rounded the edges, I would go through and do that now. You can see there's some fuzzies showing up here, and I'm going to turn up speed just a little bit. Make sure every area has been touched. I think in particular when you're doing a small piece, all the attention to detail is extremely important, and it shows up where your finished product is. In the two burrs, you could see there was still an area between the gills and the stem where the previous burrs wouldn't go. So I would typically put back in one of the saber tooth and address that area. So I've got the saber tooth in, and here I'm just pushing down. I'm not dragging. I'm just making a transition area that is similar to stippling, but it does produce the effect that all of the areas are turned. Could you see that, or did I have the cap pushed down too far?
You had the cap pulled down. This is good view.
Okay. Is that a little better?
Yes.
So in this, I'm just holding it down, pushing it down to get that round stippling effect. Sometimes if I still am not able to get in all of the areas completely, you can see I have about of an eighth of an inch. I will take a wood burn ball and complete that stippling in that area. So the the diamond does come in a variety of diameters of the ball, and each one of them has its use. The big one is good for general, first off, compared to sanding, but the smaller ones do get useful. You can get in a smaller area.
Yeah, you got the cap, you got the top down too far. There you go.
Okay, there you go. So I'm getting this into an area that,
Can you raise it up to the center of the screen more towards the, there you go.
yeah, okay. All right, I'll move these out of the way and move the cap up. So right in this area, I'm still going through, checking for any loose ends of wood, anything that needs to be cleaned up. You'll have to imagine that this was completely carved, ready to go. This one is only partially carved, but I'm still going through and doing finish. Another of the uses for this type of burr is a squiggle or scribble motion, and I find that works very well for stems of mushrooms. Here's one that is finished that has the scribble in it. So the dry brush painting still picks out that that scribble very nicely, and it gives an alternative texture. So that is the effect here on this morel. So I can create little divots. I can do scribbles. I'm gonna go on this mushroom. I'm gonna work on the base so the cap isn't in the way. So I would just start an area, start scribbling. Typically, I would start with a medium to a large, and then go over it again a second time with a different size. That's very difficult to see unpainted. So I'm gonna pick up a bigger one and see if that helps you to see it. But the scribbling or making divots is a very fast and easy way. Is that getting a light reflection okay? But that's an easy way to cover a lot of areas. And I'm just taking it and making circles. I'm not trying to pay attention to being uniform because I want it to be a totally random pattern. This also can be dragged a little bit to make either a groove or a different type of texture. That example on the bottom of the morel here. This area will pick up very nicely with the dry brush painting. I'm going to put in even a smaller ball, and that will give you an idea of the different textures and this same motion will make. Making the same circular motion. I'm not applying a lot of pressure, but there is some pressure. You can react very quickly when you're carving. One advice that I always try to do is have it secure in your hands and have this firmly in your hands. About a week ago, I don't know how, but for a second, I lost my concentration or my grip or something and tried to carve my finger. And the machine doesn't care. It doesn't say, oops, she didn't mean to do that. So I put some very nice texture in my finger and the scab came out exceedingly well designed texture. So painting with blood. Any questions on the ball nose? Or the ball cutter, I'm sorry, the ball cutter.
No.
Okay, I'm gonna go then next to one of my favorite ones, and this I got from MDI Woodturners, and it is marketed under Michael Kay's name, and it is called Cup Cutters, or you can look under Michael Kay's Cup Cutters. So here is my little tray with the cup cutters, and I'm going to go back to the Dremel for doing these. And what I like this for is making little areas that something is growing on the mushroom or some type of defect or something in the mushroom. So this cap I brought out is an example. I have used the cup cutters in a couple different ways. Here I've made an indent with the cup cutter, then gone back with the ball nose and carved into the center. Also, I've taken and used the cup cutter one size inside of another size. For example, well, that's not the one. I'll do an outer ring in a larger size and then come back with a smaller and do another cup inside. So it gives you a lot of variety. Here is a very small cup. So this cap shows quite a variety. And this does put up a little bit of a smoke, and typically I would have my fume extractor running, and that is right here, and it does make some noise. It does take the smoke and dissipate it very easily. I put this in my Dremel. I've tightened it up, and typically I do need to clean the carbon out of these. I'll take a dental type tool and just squiggle around, removing some of that carbon. So again, I'm using the Dremel. I hold the work securely. I hit it just gently with the size, go up, straight up, down, and push down. So here we go. I did this last one so you could see with this cutter, it is important to watch so you don't get a flat. So that bead, I didn't push down quite enough and the top is a little flat. So you need to watch that. I'll go back and fix that. I'm gonna try to hold this that side so you can see this better. So I'll do one that is a variety in, like I did on the cap, the red cap over here. I'll take a little bit wider. And just go through and make some cuts that are just circles. Then I can go with back to the microcarver. Maybe we'll need that for, and just gently carve out this picture. I do like that effect in combination. It does give you a variety of things to work with on your textures and patterns. So next we'll find a smaller cutter and do a cut inside that original one. This one should be small enough. These cup cutters do come in sets or individually. So either way. On a piece, I do like to add a variety of the sizes just to give it some organic shape. Well, I have this tray out. I want to show you these. And you probably recognize what they were made out of. These are ones that I have made myself. So that is the end of a drill bit, reduced down in the sides, and then with the microcarver, taking one of the burrs and making a small U-size cut in the center. So I'm going to put that in the microcarver and show you what that looks like. So that gives a very similar cut to the cup cutters. The disadvantage is that you don't get the variety in the sizes. So you have a limited diameter of your drill bit. So, but I wanted to show something that would be fast and easy to make to get started if you didn't want to invest in quite all of the equipment all at once. You could use the Dremel, some of those drill bits that have around left over in your shop, and get a variety of things going as far as textures and patterns. I'm gonna put that in the Dremel. Even though I do prefer to use the microcarver for a lot of things, I still go back to the Dremel. If I'm doing something that I want to put a lot of pressure on it, I would rather burn out or put pressure on a $50, $60 piece of equipment than a $200, $300 piece of equipment. So here's back to the Dremel. Got the drill bit. Let me try that things that hammer. Trying to do things with my left hand doesn't always work. Okay. So that is the shape that Homemade Burr did. And it's very comfortable and does work quite well. So we're close to your break time, about 5 minutes early. So on the second part, what I'm going to do is set up for dry brush painting. So now's a time for any questions on the burrs that we went through or other possibilities. I wanted to show you this. Go ahead.
Do you tend to turn the mushrooms end grain or side grain?
Do you turn the mushrooms end grain or side grain?
That's a good question. I've tried both, but I do it typically in spindle orientation. So that does give me a good surface on the cap to work with. I started as spindle turning, put a tenon on it, put it back on the lathe, and that way I can get the whole surface of the top, and I can get up in underneath the cap as well. I have found that it is more pleasing with a little dip underneath the cap. This was a mushroom I turned earlier, and I did find it pleasing, but it is more of a mushroom to sit on itself, and I really just prefer the gills to go under in a more traditional mushroom shape.
Okay.
So this is another combination. I use the Cudsall to make divots, and then the cup cutter to make the little button divots inside. So a lot of that now is experimenting with possibilities and combinations. I don't know if you want to see some of the other things other than mushrooms that I've made. I brought a couple here today. And these two are boxes, and they have the same 3 burrs. So up on the side of the body, I did use the Cudsall, use the ball nose to indent for the feathers. I did use a wood burner to create the little feather pattern, but on the bird cap, it looks identical to the caps of the mushrooms, and then squiggles around the eyes. So you can see that the same burrs, the same type of textures, and all is being applied to other pieces. This bird's eyes are cup cutters, where the others were more carved, but the expression in the bird just did change a little bit with that eye. Then I've been experimenting with a turtle box with a little tiny tail sticking out and carving for the shell. So it is something you can get started with carving using a limited amount of equipment. Just taking the first steps, making those cuts, exploring what those burrs will do, and then seeing where you can take it.
I agree.
Okay, so I will give it back to you for your break, and I'll change all my stuff here and get ready to paint when we're back. Do you want me? Okay, I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, those wig stands are beautiful, and congratulations on a great community project. So the remaining time, I'd like to talk about the finishing the painting. And what I do use is a dry brush technique, and sounds like some of you are familiar with it. So we'll switch the camera and get going here. Okay, so with any paint, whether you're painting walls, wood turning, whatever, you need to remove all of the dust. So when I got a piece done, I, with the burrs, do make sure everything is clean as far as the surface, all the surface area has been touched. Then what I will do is take a paintbrush that I use solely for this and brush it completely to get as much dust off as possible. If there is some stubborn areas, I take a nylon brush and remove all of that possible little debris. Next, what I do is take a waterproof India ink and with one of the older paint brushes, completely paint the area black. And the black background intensifies the colors, and you can see the shades of the black through the finished painting, and I feel it adds dimension and riches the color. So with all of that said, I'm going to talk about brushes. So usually the India ink I put in a smaller container, so I don't have to deal with a large area for spilling paint, because you know how it goes. If you can spill it, you will. Yeah. So with the paint brushes, just like any type of equipment, it is good to buy as good a brush as you can. you can go to several places and buy brushes for, you know, a variety pack for $3.99 or $5.99, and you will be able to use them, but they may not give you as good a results as buying a little bit more expensive brush. When you're going to Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or Blick's, also make sure you take any coupons, look online for any coupons. And just like any other equipment, keeping them clean is well worth the time. Don't just set them in your little bucket of water and hope for the best. It is good to clean them. This brush is older and it was well cared for, but it has over time lost its shape. So I use that brush for putting on the black Indie ink because it's just a good use for a brush that it's a little past its prime. Then talking in the same vein about the paint, I do prefer and use golden paint, whether it's in the tube or in the fluid, in the liquid bottles. There's a few reasons. The golden paint colors are very rich and vibrant, and that does show up on the work, the quality of the paint as well. With the golden paint, you're working with an acrylic, and acrylic is basically a plastic, but you don't want to paint to look plastic, in particular on something like a mushroom. You want to have the a matte effect and be able to distinguish that there is texture and pattern underneath. So the little bottles of paint that you buy at Michael's or Hobby Lobby for $2 will provide color, but they will dry with more of a plastic shiny effect. So you, with dry brushing, are using extremely small amounts of paint, so the paint will last and you'll get more satisfaction with the results in a better paint. With a dry brush, what we're going to end up doing is putting about 15 or 20 layers of paint on your finished piece. So we're going to do this mushroom cap today, and in order to save time, I have painted it black so we didn't have to sit and wait for that paint to dry. It is a good idea to let the India ink dry so that you're not just muddying up the colors. And I got my handy pliers for helping opening the paint tubes, and I'm painting a very small area, so I'm putting a very small amount of paint on my palette. And my palette used to be a lid for a yogurt container. So save those little bits of plastic. You never know when they're going to come in useful. You can use a paper plate, but I do find that the yogurt caps do well. When I'm done, if I feel like it, I can clean them off. The paint just peels off very easily. I'm putting some paint on the palette, and then I'll go through and tell you the colors I'm using. I start with a darker color, so the burnt sienna. I find that using burnt sienna with the other colors, uniform, adds a uniform earthy tinge to the work, and I find that very pleasing. So I have burnt sienna, cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, and then a green hue. The green is very dark, and I might end up on this piece when it's finished adding white or a lighter green, just for some variety. So I'll put a little white on the palette as well. So the brush I like to use for this is the flathead brush. The bristles aren't necessarily stiff, but they're firm. So I will take a little bit of the dark or the Sierra brown, wipe off most of it, and then I use a piece of newspaper or brown craft paper, and I remove a lot of the paint. This serves two purposes. It gives me a record of the colors I've used, and I can easily count how many layers of paint I put on. So then moving the piece around from side to side, not paying attention to direction, but I do want to interject a variety. I blob that paint off just to make sure that I don't have a real big blob stuck on the paintbrush, because if I do that, then that blob is going to go in the wrong place. You just know it's going to end up where you don't want to have it at all. So I'm not expecting to see much of the results on this, but you'll be surprised. At the end, you still will know that I didn't just use one or two colors. That is going to reflect and see some variety in the finished piece. So I have one layer on. So I'm going to take, that was a straight brown color. So I'm going to take some of the green and mix in with the brown and track that on my blotting paper here. So this is the green mixed in with the brown. So on goes the second layer. When I'm doing this, I would make sure if I'm painting that I paint all of the areas that is of the mushroom. I'm today going to ignore the base, the stem, and the gills. I'm just going to go with the mushroom cap. But around and round we go, putting variety of directions and getting that next layer added. So I'm going to take a little bit more green, add it to the mixture I had previously, and this still will have some of the brown tinge to it, but it will slowly change colors. You can see more of a color change on my marker sheet here. So repeating the process, the dry brush paint, because we're using so little, dries almost immediately. So you don't have to worry about waiting for paint to dry or any, you know, pooling in color. In particular, if you are careful and don't get a blob of paint on your brush. So adding more green, I'm going to eventually end up with just the solid green. So this is our fourth layer, and you can see it's a little greener already. The next layer might be just a solid green without any of the brown mixed in. I haven't been getting the top out that well, so I'm going to make sure I got the top in this go around. I know these subtle changes are hard to see in the camera. It's still showing all black, but by the time we've got 15 layers, you'll see some results. And just like in the first section, if you have any questions, just speak up. All right, here we go. We've got the solid green hue on our brush here. Making sure I get that top and all of the areas. Okay, so we've got 5 coats in on our piece here. I'm not going to clean the brush, but I'm just going to dip it into water. It's nice to keep those acrylics moist. If you are painting for a long time, they have a tendency to dry out. So I'm going to take a little bit of the brown and put it closer to the orange. I tell you, this is one of my favorite combinations, the orange and the brown. It really is a color I really like. So we're on our 6th layer. That was quite a bit of paint on my brush. So you can see even on the back side, there's quite a bit more paint this time than before. And part of that was because I dipped my brush into water, but I want to make sure you see something and don't think I'm just waving this brush across the piece of wood, that we're actually doing some painting here. So what I'm going to do now, the same as I did for the green, is add in more orange and do another layer. Each time it lightens and changes the color a little bit. Also, you can decide with a dry brushing, in particular with the mushroom, to have one section that is a different color altogether. So you may bring in some red and not do painting throughout the whole piece, but just in an area to show a little variety. Can you see it's starting to show some color changes here?
Yep.
Yeah. So the tendency is when you're doing this to make it more dramatic so you can actually see it. But so we are on our 8th layer here. And we're still in the brown and orange combination. I don't know, for some reason, I'm attracted to this orange color. You can see on the birds and the turtle, I've been experimenting with blues and greens. And the blues are usually not my first choice in colors. And particular with the mushroom, you don't see too many blue ones, but I guess that shouldn't hold you back from painting a mushroom blue. Also on here, I'll go through and show you how I paint the cup cutter areas. So that isn't with dry brush and it's a little shinier. So we'll make sure we leave enough time to do that. So this time it should be a solid orange. And that's quite a bit brighter. Making sure I get on the edges and the top and every which way. You can still see there's quite a bit of black showing through, but it's in particular, if I scrunch the brush down, it's starting to get some color overlapping the black. One thing I also like to do is combine the colors. So adding a little orange to the yellow it just is fun to mix up the colors. I do add a little bit brown here with the yellow. Start a new row. I got quite a bit up there on the further up on my brush, so I'm gonna. Okay. The yellow will really brighten up the piece. Usually I start with the darker colors and work towards the lighter. You can start to see a resemblance in this to this previous, and you can see I have used these same colors quite a bit. So we'll keep on going, adding a little bit more yellow to the brown and yellow mixed as we've gone, same as we've done in the previous two colors. And when I'm doing this, I'm not necessarily going to go over the entire area because I want some areas to be highlighted more than others. Every time I brush or dip my brush in the paint, I do wipe it off just to make sure I have no blobs. The brush was feeling a little dry for me, so I dampened it and trying to remove some of that excess, but trying to get a mixture. It is dry brushing, but you do need to keep the ink or the paint fluid. So adding a little moisture once in a while is necessary. So another blob of yellow to the mixture. Once in a while, I do also clean the edges on the side of the paint palette. With doing the dry brush, you don't have to wait for paint to dry. It goes on immediately, and you can, if you have to, go back with a darker color, but I try not to do that too much. But the occasion I will do it is that, for example, if it's looking too yellow, I might go back to the darker orange just to put a variety, more of a variety. Sometimes one color will dominate over others. Okay, I think now I'm going to take pure yellow, and with this one, we're close to having let's see, 15 layers of paint. And I know we're doing a small piece, but it has gone by relatively fast. Now I'm going to just take a little blob of white and add it to that yellow. caught some of the orange here. I'm sort of liking that color. So I'm gonna bring in a little bit more orange. And it did give me a new look here, a new brightness. I'm gonna not take that everywhere, just in a few areas. All right, so that is 15 layers, and we should really put in 5 more. So I'm open here. I'm gonna bring out my tub and see about adding another color. We could go with red, or I've got a nice little gold here. Let's see. Or we could be really wild and go with teal. Any preferences?
Teal.
Teal.
Okay. Yes, teal is a beautiful color. All right, we're gonna open that one up.
Is there a difference between the tube paint and the bottle paint?
The tube is, the bottle they called fluid, so it's a liquid. So you can see the white on the palette. Well, maybe you can't. It's a white blob there, and that is liquid paint. The other is more like a paste. And every paint tube that ever ends up looking the same, full of paint all over and blobs on the end. So I'm gonna add a little water to my paintbrush. And just to be consistent, I'm gonna add just a little bit of brown to the teal just to start with. And it's still a beautiful color there. Look at that. Well, I think it's a beautiful color. Wow, I'm liking the teal. You guys made a good choice. I'm gonna just do certain areas, not the whole mushroom cap, just because some of the areas are different. With that brown, it did stuck my finger in the paint. It did add a little darkness, so we'll do the same pattern, adding more teal to our blob each time we go by. This is going to be quite a bit brighter. I'm going to go over the same areas. Making sure I get the center and the edges. And ready for more teal. This is ending up being pretty bright. I like these pieces of paper that oftentimes I'll save them, and not that I'll reuse them, but I'll remember the color combinations and see what I like. But then I'll go through a cleaning spurge and they all get thrown in the garbage. So I do keep them around, and I'll use them just like a sample board. And I really, really like sample boards. So it's a good memory refresher. It's a good way to remember what you've done and the process and what combinations of colors. I'm going to be really daring and add white to that and make it even brighter. I'm adding quite a bit of white. You can see that on the final here. I think my end piece ended up really beautiful with that teal. It really added a nice earthy look to that mushroom. So that is 20 coats of paint. One thing that I do occasionally, in particular, if I want something to glisten a little bit more or stand out, and you know, I said, oh, I don't want it look plastic or fake, but sometimes a little bit of shine gives a reflection, like it has water drops or some moisture has been landed on the mushroom. So I use these color shift. This particular one is by Ferber, but Golden does make some color shift. And I'm going to do something you never should do. I dip my brush right into the cap. I find that with these paints, if I squeeze out, I end up squeezing out half a bottle, and I just don't need that much paint. You saw I just dipped it in a little bit, and that's all I'm looking for, is just a little bit of sparkle in some of that area.
Could you hold the bottle up so we can see the label?
I'm trying to get it so there's no glare. Can you see it now?
What was the name of it again?
It is folk art, and it's color shift. On the top of the bottle, it shows the colors this is going to shift to. Yeah, you can get it at Joanne Fabrics as well. This one I particularly like. It is brown and bronze, so I'm going to put just a little bit of that as well on this mushroom, just to tone down and give it a little earthy look. So we have really about 22 layers of paint on this mushroom cap. And it didn't take all that long to do it. It sounds like, oh, you're putting 20 coats of paint. It must take you all day, but it didn't. And what I want to do next is paint some of these little cup cutter, and I see I don't have an example on this. Let me see if I've got, I'll pull out one of my other demo pieces and get that painted. So just a second. So for this, I do switch to one of the other paint brushes that is more delicate, and I'm going to really end up painting it directly and solid. So because we had this nice teal out color, I'm going to dip the brush in that and then go to the area where I did the cup cutter, and I'm gonna paint. I'm trying very carefully not to, very carefully trying not to get the edges or slop the paint around too much. These areas I'm intending to be a feature, a highlight, and if there's slop paint, people are gonna see that first for the wrong reasons. So I'll go through, paint a layer, and just let that dry for, a few minutes, just to give it an opportunity to dry. Then what I will do is take some liquid text, or I have done it with the Min Wax varnish, but just a little drop to give some sheen to that paint. So I put it in this bottle because, like a lot of my bottles that I have, I end up getting paint all over everything, and you can no longer read the label anyway. So I put just a little bit of the color into that drop of the liquid text medium, load up the brush, and put a final coat. And you can tell already it is smoothing out the paint because it is a little more liquidy, and it's adding a sheen. So again, I tried to select my brush so it's smaller than the hole that I'm painting, and try not to get paint up on the edges. So there is the teal little buttons that I painted.
Linda?
Yes,
Yeah, this would be like the final coat. You would have done the whole mushroom and then did this final
yes, yes,
painting.
yes.
Okay.
That's a good point. So on this, when I was doing the dry brush, the paint would have gone over those areas just like all the other. So when I'm all finished with all the painting, I'll go back and then do these little button areas. That way they can get a solid contrasting color, something that is brighter than, here they are a red orange color, something to contrast or highlight the area. So let's see what to, with this red, this mushroom, the caps are typically red and white. And so I left everything fairly dark and black. The trouble with dry brushing and using red is it's hard not to get pink. So this does have a lot of burgundy and dark reds, even some blue, trying to avoid that pink. If anyone's successful in drying brush with red and white and not getting pink, I'd like to know how they did it. So you can see the little purples and burgundies, but overall it still reads as red, but gives that variety of colors. I'm going to bring this mushroom back out just to talk about, I did experiment with dry brushing with whites. And here again, I have tried on several times experimenting and gone with blacks, grays to the white. And this one, I was fairly happy with the results. It may not show, but I have 5 coats of just pure white added onto this. And the time I was making this one, I was experimenting with metal reactive paints and then experimenting with acrylics. And with the acrylics, I was trying to get a reaction similar to the metal reactive, but in a more predictable way. By predictable, I mean you can control where it goes. So I was adding salt and baking soda, different degrees or levels of salt, table salt, margarita salt, like that. So I added that to this paint in the greens, in the yellow greens, and it has table salt to replicate or create moss. And someone told me that moss would never grow on a mushroom. So here's living proof that there is moss on a mushroom. But I really enjoy the experimenting with the paints, experimenting with these burrs. And on this cap, I did extend the gills up into the cuts I made for gills up to the cap, and elongated the carving. I've done some experimenting with the carving to replicate movement such as water. And one of the critiques I heard, and I think it's absolutely right, is I was making everything too uniform in shape. And so water does elongate. Even if you look at the ripples or the waves, it looks like it's all fairly uniform, but it's not. There's some elongated parts and smaller. So that's what I try to put in, a variety of the shapes, just because nature isn't always 100% identical. So are there any questions on the painting techniques, the dry brushing?
What is liquid text? Is that like a liquid acrylic?
Well, it's a medium, and it is I really apologize for not having the original bottle, but it is a medium. It does add some shine and gloss to the paint. I've also used that liquid text medium for dirty pours. So with the dirty pour, you put the liquid text medium, the acrylic, and then silicone, and that mixture forms the cells for painting. So it is fairly versatile. I can't say is that I'm an expert on painting. I have taken a few online acrylic painting classes, and I recently joined a group in my neighborhood that is organized by Egan Art House, and they are a group that teaches crafts, particular ceramic and painting. So they have a group they call Artists Connect. So it is a monthly meeting. The artists get together, talk about techniques, philosophy, what they're working on. We ask advice from others, and my hope is to learn and take some classes from, in person, some of the acrylic painters to learn more about the medium, because painting on wood is really fun and wonderful, and I want to continue to do that, but I want to learn more about the properties of the paint and how others are using it. One thing I did pick up on the online acrylic painting is the use of the Liquitex medium and Liquitex gel. There's the gel that you can thicken, or you can add the gel to the paint and it will create a 3D type effect. You can raise it up similar to what you did with one of the instant gallery pieces. So that is another area. Let me get that jar here just a second. Oh, and this bottle is very clean. So this is a golden regular gel gloss, and the bottle is almost empty, but you can see it is a fairly thick, and it is a gel. You mix it with the paint, and it enables you to get the paint to stand upright. So I'm going to mix that in with some of the teal, so it will become teal colored. And where's my little, I'm going to put something on the stem here. So those are standing proud, and they will dry that way. So
You also mentioned that you utilize that acrylic paint or gel in silicone. In what manner do you use that?
So that is like a dirty pour. I have a mushroom cap I did with that. Just a second. So with a dirty pour, in this case, I think I used 4 colors, a green, a gray, and a black. I think it was a silver as well, and mix each one of them in the little paper cup, little tiny paper cup. So put the Liquitex gel in there, or Liquitex medium, some acrylic paint, and then a couple drops of silicone. Then stir them well, and then my 4 little containers go into a larger container, layering the paint, emptying each one of the cups into there, layering it, giving it just one stir with an X, putting that cup upside down on the top of what you're painting, let it rest for a minute, release it, and then swirl the paint so it covers all the area. So then you get those cells. And I find that is very pleasing. I've done it for jewelry and a few mushroom caps.
What is your finish of choice?
Well, with acrylic, and this was confirmed in the online class I took, actually acrylic is plastic, and you don't need to finish the plastic. It's done. That's why I use the, for areas that I wanted shiny. Typically I use the golden because it's matte. On this paint, I use the cheaper $2 bottles, and you can see it's shiny. So typically I don't put any finish. If this mushroom, put my finger in the teal. If this mushroom was finished and the bottom was untextured, unpainted, I would probably put some Renaissance wax on it. I like the feel of the wax. But there's a lot you can do with acrylic paints. It's a whole new world of medium. It's just a fascinating area.
Do you sell your work, and how do you price all the time you put into making a piece?
Well, I've retired for 2 years now, and I've used that 2 years to try to get my work up to a level that I'm comfortable and confident. And I have not concentrated on production or selling. I have tried to sell, and I have been successful in selling a few pieces. And a lot of that has been at symposium, either AEW symposium or SWAT, or there's a couple local galleries that I'm a member of that I have sold through. Pricing is extremely difficult. You know, you can, with a simple mushroom like this, by the time you go through all the steps, all the painting, you have 4 or 5 hours into it. It's a difficult thing. And a lot of this time in the past 2 years, I'm concentrating on refining my procedure, getting it up to where it is at a level that I'm comfortable and proud of, not necessarily that I'm going to production to sell $75 little mushrooms, because that's how much time it takes. But it is all part of the learning process. For what I'm doing now is taking those things I've learned and working more on the little turtle boxes and the birds. So those I have not speeded up, but gotten comfortable so I can go a little bit faster. And I'm confident in knowing what steps and procedures I want to do. For example, this turtle box, I may have, because of sanding and everything, an hour and a half or 2 hours to make the box, and 2 hours into the carving and painting. So that's 4 hours worth of work. And then at this point, I probably would sell it for $150, $175. So it's not a production wage or a wage you're gonna make a lot of money, but at this point, I'm fortunate that I'm doing okay without having to make production work to make rent and things. I know it's an extremely difficult and personal question. It's hard for me to answer that.
Okay. Wow, thank you.
I got one last.
Got one last question.
Yes.
How many tops did you wind up getting after your
Well,
retirement?
Oh, over 200, and oh, they were just each one just a wonderful treasure. They're currently on exhibit at AAW in the gallery, and the exhibit was to go to the end of May, but the curator there, Tiff Shaw, said that everyone just loves looking at them, so she has extended the show. So they're just wonderful. Not all of them spun, but all of them were made with the artist style and signature. So a lot of friendships there.
Good, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Linda, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We're a few minutes early, but if there's no other questions, we'll turn it back to you for chapter meeting then.
All right, thank you so much
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
You too. I'm gonna, the recording here.